On the news, Supreme Court restrains the Central Bank of Nigeria from implementing deadline for old Naira notes validity. Despite petrol and Naira scarcity in the country, INEC chairman says elections will hold as planned. And federal government blames marketers profiteering for petrol price hike. It's a pleasure to have you join us on News Now at this hour. I am Simisola Adigun. The Supreme Court has temporarily restrained the federal government from banning the use of the old Naira notes from February 10, 2023. A 7-member panel of the Apex Court, led by John Okoro, made the ruling on Wednesday in an ex parte application brought by Kaduna, Kogi, and Zamfara states. The plaintiffs said since the announcement of the policy, there has been an acute shortage in the supply of the new Naira notes in their states. Moving the application on Wednesday, Abdul Hakim Mustafa, counsel to the applicants, praised the Apex Court to grant the application in the interest of justice and the well-being of Nigeria. He said the policy of the government has led to an excruciating situation that is almost leading to anarchy in the country.
We invoked the original jurisdiction of Supreme Court when there's a dispute between the state government and federal government. It's one of the few occasions where Supreme Court has the original jurisdiction. So we invoked the powers of the Supreme Court to hear this application. The reason for it is that as well-intentioned as this policy of federal government already designed, is working hardship all over the country. As we can all see, banks are being harassed, Nigerians are suffering needlessly, especially the downtrodden. Those in the urban areas, they're having problems, but it's more excruciating at the rural area. So these three state governments, Kaduna, Zamfara, and Kogi, deem it fit for us to invoke the powers of Supreme Court to intervene. And the Supreme Court are not just the final court, but a court of policy. In its considered ruling, saw merits in our application and restrained the federal government, and by extension, the Central Bank of Nigeria. The old notes that we all have is still a legal tender beyond the 10th of February that the federal government said is no longer a legal tender. So the old notes, as we speak, the Supreme Court has spoken, and Supreme Court is the last court, is the final court, is the Apex Court. It has said that 10th of February is no longer operative.
No, the other is an ex parte, and because of the urgency and the affidavit of urgency filed by the applicants, the court in its wisdom decided that something must be done because of the urgency. But the court has rightly, in its own wisdom, directed that all processes must be there by 15th, that is Wednesday next week, for us to argue our various positions.
To speak more on the Supreme Court's ruling, I'm now joined on the news by legal expert Tunde Falola. Thank you for joining me, Tunde. Now, the Supreme Court has waded into the Naira swap crisis, which has caused chaos in every part of the country. Now, what do you make of the judgment banning the February 10 deadline set by the CBN on the use of the old Naira notes? Hello, Tunde, can you hear me?
Yeah, no, me too.
All right, now I said, now that the Supreme Court has waded into the Naira swap crisis, which has caused chaos in every part of the country, what do you make of the judgment by the Supreme Court banning the February 10 deadline?
I thought you had my reaction or suggestion. Hello?
Yes, I'm listening.
Yeah, I said if I could hear you well, my suggestion on a position.
Okay, now a major reason for the CBN's decision to set the deadline for the use of the old Naira notes was to curb corruption and particularly stop vote buying during the elections. Now, do you think that the Supreme Court's ruling would anyway disrupt this course by the Central Bank of Nigeria?
Thank you very much. Let me start by commending the Apex Court for this landmark ruling. It has been the yearning and aspiration of Nigeria that something drastic we have to come on board at this particular time when we are experiencing this kind of financial hardship, orchestrated by the unpopular policy by the Central Bank of Nigeria. Let me start by saying that if the reason for introducing this monetary policy by CBN was to curb corruption and food buying, let me add that it is actually outside the power of the Central Bank of Nigeria to intend to, prevent food buying during the election. Food buying and inducement of voters, is actually an offense under the Electoral Act. And it is only INEC that can prosecute, that kind of offense. So the CBN has no power whatsoever under the Central Bank of Nigeria Act, the Establishment Act, to try to say they want to curb, food buying. So even though they have the power to reissue currency under Section 17B of the Central Bank of Nigeria Establishment Act, that section does not provide, the time frame within which that policy could be accomplished. So there is no need for rush. There is no need for, all this, urgency. There is no need for urgency in terms of, the currency swap. So I see no reason why the Central Bank of Nigeria will be adamant, in the face of, appeal from Nigeria that the policy should be extended, the time frame should be extended. So the Supreme Court has come in as the last hope of the common man, and all of us, I think, we have to commend their lordships for this, landmark ruling. That is my position.
Well, legal expert Tunde Falola, many thanks for your time and your contribution. Now, in Abuja, residents have hailed the judgment by the Supreme Court banning the deadline for the use of the old Naira notes. While lamenting the problems they encounter to get money for their day-to-day transactions, they say the time frame set by the CBN is a wrong move, adding that the implementation is faulty. They called on the governor of the CBN, Godwin Emefiele, to obey the court's ruling and allow for a gradual withdrawal of the old Naira notes.
Well, the Supreme Court has shown that they are supreme. They felt the cry, they heard the cry of the masses. Because these few days, a lot of people has suffered. You cannot go to the bank and get 10,000 naira. And in fact, if they want to give you money, they are giving you old notes like 50 naira. Some people are even giving 10 naira. So things are really affecting business. It's really affecting so many things in the country. So a lot of people are crying. So we thank the Supreme Court for standing firm.
I pray if Buhari will maintain his integrity at this point, he should obey the court order. Emefiele, the time frame is a failure. The progress of it is a failure. The process is a failure. The outcome is a failure. After extension, we still have this problem. There is a failure. The 100 days has passed. They had 10 days. We are now in 8 days. All the way from airport, I cannot enter and take money. My money that I work for, the sweat of my labor. I cannot have access to it, to spend. Is it when I die, my children will be coming to collect the money? Think of it.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable with the Supreme Court's judgment because the suffering on Nigerians is too much. They keep telling us that the Naira notes will get better, it will be available. But till now, on Friday is the deadline, and we are not seeing anything. The suffering is still the same. People are looking for cash. You have your money in the bank, you cannot get it. So I don't see any reality in what they are saying. So I'm very comfortable with the Supreme Court judgment overruling that the old Naira note should be used till further notice. Me personally, with the sufferings I've encountered, I am very comfortable with the Supreme Court judgment because the government have not shown seriousness at all in whatsoever in this policy.
Hours after the Supreme Court's ruling restraining the February 10 deadline for the use of the old Naira notes, President Muhammadu Buhari has received the governor of the CBN, Godwin Emefiele, in Aso Rock, Abuja. On Friday, February 3, President Buhari appealed to Nigerians to give him 7 days to address the issue of Naira scarcity in the country. There have also been protests in various parts of the country where banks have become a major target of attacks by angry supporters. Now, despite petrol and Naira scarcity in the country, Chairman of the Independent Independent and National Electoral Commission (INEC) has assured that elections will hold as planned. Mahmoud Yakubu said this after meeting with the Federal Executive Council, FEC, presided over by President Muhammadu Buhari on Wednesday. Yakubu's reassurance is in response to various concerns which have been raised about how the current crisis in the country may affect the conduct of the forthcoming presidential and governorship elections on February 25 and March 11, respectively. Addressing journalists after the meeting, the INEC chairman said members of the council were taking through all the preparations put in place for the elections and how challenges are being addressed.
So basically, it's about the readiness of the Commission to conduct the elections. So we took members of council through all the preparations that we have put in place for the election and the few challenges that we are facing and the steps that we have taken to address those challenges. I can tell you two of these challenges quickly. The first one is availability of petroleum products. We had a meeting with the National Union of Road Transport Workers, and they raised that as an issue of concern. Immediately after that meeting, we interfaced with the leadership of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited. And right now, there's a technical committee working. The idea is for them to avail us the use of their over 900 land mega stations as well as floating mega stations nationwide for the purpose of stocking products to ensure that the Commission doesn't suffer any encumbrances in movement of personnel and materials for the election. The second one is the currency issue. And again, we had an engagement yesterday with the governor of the central bank, and he assured us that the Commission will not suffer any encumbrances on that score. Fortunately for us, all our accounts, national and state, are held by the Apex Bank. So we raised those challenges, but we have found a solution to those challenges. So be rest assured that the election will hold as scheduled on the 25th of February for national and on the 11th of March for the state election.
The Court of Appeal in Abuja has dismissed a suit by the Allied People's Movement (APM) seeking to disqualify Peter Obi as the presidential candidate of the Labour Party. Delivering judgment, the president of the court, Justice Monica Dongban-Mensah, dismissed the appeal on the grounds that it lacked merit and the APM lacked the legal right to initiate the suit. The appellate court also awarded a cost of 200,000 naira against APM in favor of the Labour Party and Peter Obi, who are the second and the third respondents in the suit. Meanwhile, the General Secretary of the National Union of Electricity Employees, Joseph Ajero, has emerged as the new national president of the Nigeria Labour Congress (NLC). Ajero emerged as a consensus candidate at the end of the Congress 13th National Delegates Conference in Abuja on Wednesday. Ajero, who until his emergence as president of the NLC was the deputy national president of the Labour Union, who made history by emerging unopposed as the union's president. In his acceptance speech, the new NLC president vowed to mobilize members against the current scarcity of naira notes if the government failed to address the issue by the end of next week. Ajero succeeds Ayuba Waba, whose tenure as NLC national president ended on Wednesday, February 7. President Muhammadu Buhari has called on member states of the African Union to imbibe the culture of peer review and peer-to-peer learning for proactive and strong leadership in the continent. The president made the call at the launch of the Second Country Review Report and the National Program of Action of Nigeria. The president explained that his commitment to the second review of Nigeria was born out of his undiluted resolve to entrench democracy and quality leadership in all aspects of governance and further ensure that Nigeria does not lag behind other nations. Our correspondent, Mary Kanu, has more in this report.
Often described as Africa's unique and innovative approach to governance, the African peer review mechanism has an objective of improving governance dynamics at the local, national and continental levels. Presenting a review report on Tuesday, President Muhammadu Buhari expressed satisfaction that electoral, pension, tax and monetary policy reforms undertaken by his administration had received high commendations from African policy experts.
This document is important to us as a democratic nation built on true federalism and good governance. My commitment to the second review of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is born out of my undiluted resolute to entrench democracy and quality leadership in all aspects of governance and further ensure that Nigeria does not lag behind other nations.
Speaking on the report, President Buhari said it would strengthen the implementation of African Union Agenda of 2063, the strategic framework for the socio-economic transformation of the continent over the next 50 years.
The report will strengthen the implementation Agenda 2063, which is a strategic framework for the socio-economic transformation of the African continent over the next 50 years. It comes with a strong mandate on NAPAD and African Peer Review Mechanism, especially now that the continent is gearing towards the implementation of second 10-year development plan to consolidate and seek the acceleration of better society.
The National Coordinator and Chief Executive Officer, Alda Napad, APRM Nigeria, said the launch of the report will pave the way for reinforcement of successful best practices in promoting good governance and sustainable development at all levels.
The document will serve as a viable tool for economic growth. The National Program of Action is a design framework for the effective implementation of the country review reports, recommendations geared towards successful of African Union Agenda 2063 and mainstreaming of the SDGs 2030 in the country. Certainly, the report is made to consolidate the best practices, address challenges, and proffer solutions that will consolidate governance in Nigeria. It will also boost investors' confidence, economic growth and development in the country.
The Agenda 2063 will serve as Africa's development blueprint to achieve inclusive and sustainable socio-economic development over a 50-year period. Mary Kanu, TV360, Nigeria.
We'll take a break here, but still to come, death toll rises above 11,200 in Turkey, Syria quake. We'll bring you details of the story and more when we return. Welcome back. Now here's a recap of some of our top stories tonight. The Supreme Court has temporarily restrained the federal government from banning the use of the old Naira notes from February 10, 2023. A 7-member panel of the Apex Court, led by John Okoro, made the ruling on Wednesday in an ex parte application brought by Kaduna, Kogi and Zamfara states. Moving the application on Wednesday, Abdul Hakim Mustafa, counsel to the applicants, prayed the Apex Court to grant the application in the interest of justice and the well-being of Nigeria. We also told you that the chairman of the Independent and National Electoral Commission (INEC) has assured that elections will hold as planned. Mahmoud Yakubu said this after a meeting with the Federal Executive Council presided over by President Muhammadu Buhari on Wednesday. Addressing journalists after the meeting with the council, the INEC chairman said members are taking through all the proper preparations put in place for the election and how challenges are being addressed. And in case you missed any of our news bulletins or for more updates, you can catch us on Limex World TV or log on to our website on www.tv360nigeria.com. You can also follow us on our social media platforms on Twitter, Instagram and YouTube at TV360 Nigeria. On Facebook, we're at TV360 Online. The Australian government has said it will roll out its 5th dose of COVID-19 vaccines later this month to all citizens aged 18 and above who have not contracted coronavirus or been vaccinated in the past 6 months, Health Minister Mark Butler announced on Wednesday. The decision expands eligibility for the booster shot to include about 14 million people, more than half of the country's population, who will be offered Omicron variant-specific vaccines from February 20. According to Butler, the rollout of the 5th shot will help deal with what inevitably will be the next phase of the next wave of COVID sometime over the course of 2023. We'll take another break here and return with business updates. To stay with us. Welcome back. Mary Kano joins us now with updates in business. Mary, over to you.
Thank you, Simisola. Hello and welcome to Business News. The federal government has blamed the high cost of petroleum products in some parts of the country on marketers who now engage in profiteering. The Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Temepere Silva, disclosed this to State House correspondents after the Federal Executive Council meeting presided over by President Muhammadu Buhari at the Council chambers on Wednesday. The minister maintained that petroleum products are not in short supply, but the challenge, he said, is the distribution of the product, a problem he says the government is working to resolve.
We have reports of profiteering by marketers, and I've directed NMDPRA to sanction anybody who profiteers on this kind of situation. I mean, we cannot stand by and watch our citizens being exploited by marketers. But of course, I've given that directive, and I don't know if it has not taken, I don't know the details of how far that directive has been carried out. But I'm going to still further give that directive if that is still the situation. But definitely we are not paying a blind eye at all.
We'll take a break now and return with a review of the stock market. The Nigerian stock market recovered from Tuesday's loss with a 0.23% rise in the equity capitalization, which reflects a 69.3 billion naira gain. Following the growth, the market's capitalization closed at 29.6 trillion naira. Market breadth closed negative, ending with 23 losers and 11 gainers. Triple G led the gainers list with 10 kobo rise in share price and was closely followed by International Energy Insurance Market summary shows that investors exchanged 151 million volume of shares in 2,974 deals. Now over to the global scene. Now it's another mixed trading day. In the US and Asia, stocks are trading down, while in the UK, the FTSE has hit a new all-time high as investors digest the latest comments from US Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell on easing inflation, and that's why we can see that the FTSE is trading up at 0.31%. And that's all on Stock Market Review. Simisola, back to you.
Many thanks, Mary. Now on the global scene, the death toll from the massive earthquake that struck Turkey and Syria has risen above 11,200 on Wednesday as rescuers raced to save survivors trapped under debris in the winter cold. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan gave an update on the casualty figures during a visit to a southern Turkish city at the epicenter of the initial quake. Officials and medics say 8,574 people had died in Turkey and 2,662 in Syria from Monday's 7.8 magnitude tremor, bringing the total to 11,236. Nearly 50,000 people were also injured in Turkey and another 5,000 in Syria. In sports, ahead of the last window of the 2023 FIBA Basketball World Cup African qualifiers later this month in Alexandria and Luanda, the World Basket Governing Body FIBA has confirmed the schedule for the final and decisive window 6 of the qualifiers. The 18 games, which will determine the 4 teams to join Ivory Coast as representatives of Africa at the World Cup in Indonesia, Japan and Philippines, will be played from February 24 to 26 in Alexandria, Egypt and Luanda in Angola. Of the 16 countries that started the African qualifiers in November 2021, 12 teams remain in the competition to secure the right to represent Africa in the 2023 World Cup. For the Tigers, they are faced with the task of qualifying for the World Cup following a poor outing in window 5 of the qualifiers. Well, that's our package this evening. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Simisola Adigun. Bye for now.